You're going to get a bit of a two-for-one today. I want to talk about religion and mental health, at least in my case, and how the two kind of have interacted, and kind of the issues that one has led to another, or the other has led to the one. So before we get into this, let's just give some background. So as you guys know, I suffer from bipolar, in particular bipolar type 2. Looking back on it, it's very obvious now that I suffered from childhood bipolar, which is uncommon, but it's pretty clear that I had periods of mania, periods of depression, and periods of mixed states. I could remember times in my childhood where I'd laugh and cry at the same time, times where I'd just go hyper, super aggressive and just start fights and that kind of thing. And then most of the time I was just extremely depressed. Like, for my part, I was suicidal back when I think I was like 6 years old or something like that, that far back. And I used to, when I was that age, think about smothering myself with a pillow or jumping off the roof or something. It's always been a big thing. And one of the kind of core, negative aspects maybe of bipolar disorder is the delusional aspect of it. Now, there's a difference between delusion and psychosis. These are two very different things. Psychosis is when you physically see things that aren't there. Be it an illusion, you hear a voice in your head, you have just something completely reality altering. You lose your perception of the outside world to such an extent that it's physical. A delusion is when you're emotionally or intellectually, I don't know how you describe it, out of whack, where you get these irrational or exaggerated views of reality, but they're purely an emotional mental state. They don't involve hearing voices or anything like that. I've never had anything resembling psychosis in my life, but I've had frequent periods of delusion. So delusion often manifests in something called magical thinking. Now, magical thinking, I think, is described as an issue with perceiving cause and effect. So when I was younger, and I kind of had this longer than other people, I would go through periods where I thought I had magical powers and I could curse people, or that I had I never had multiple personalities, but I thought I was under the delusion I did. It's kind of hard to describe. I would pretend that I did. I would also have delusional phases where I thought people were trying to poison me or collectively get me. And then I went through delusional phases where I thought I was a messianic figure who God had sent to punish humanity. And that was all kind of wrapped up in very severe mood switches, etc. So that's kind of the background. And when I was in high school, they decided to start treating my depression, so I started to get Luvox back then. And that helped the depressive aspect. The issue with that is if you're bipolar and you take an antidepressant without a mood stabilizer, it just further destabilizes your mood. And it makes you go crazier. So it helped my depression a bit, but it also destabilized me and made me cycle more rapidly between mania and depression. So to kind of treat that, they gave me Seroquel, which is an antipsychotic. Never let them put you on Seroquel. I don't say that about many drugs. Never let them put you on Seroquel. It's the worst medication I've ever taken. It caused extreme weight gain, and it's a major sedative. But that was given to try to help control it, and it just kind of befuddled my mind. But kind of the same thing persisted. I went through a period in university where I thought I was like a prophet, and I was going to found a new religion and stuff like that. Just magical, out of the box, crazy over the top stuff. And one of the core issues with this is I was very unwilling to get help because, or to take therapy seriously, because I was so just crazy. I was under the delusion that they were trying to hurt me or brainwash me or that kind of thing. And eventually what happened is once I got through university, I'm like, obviously, I probably have bigger issues with depression because antidepressants aren't really working consistently. They'd work for about a year and then they'd stop having effectiveness. So what I would wind up doing was I went and I paid a doctor of psychology to do a report on me, a full psych eval, and he uncovered that I definitely had bipolar. So my doctor gave me a mood stabilizer, and it immediately had very dramatic impacts on me. I refer to it as quieting my mind. Most of my delusional thinking went away very quickly. I was able to do very well in therapy. I just became overall a much calmer, better person. I look back on how I used to be in a lot of ways and like, geez, I was fucking crazy back then. And it just completely changed my life getting on a mood stabilizer. I take lamotrigine, which is more for depression than mania, but it does have like a anti-delusional aspect. And what's nice about it is it doesn't cause confusion or tiredness. It's neutral on energy levels, which is nice because I think lithium and valproic acid both cause not only weight gain but tiredness or sluggishness. So how does this kind of relate with religiosity? What I've had to do over the years is impose a very strict discipline on my brain. That is just ignoring most feelings, that kind of thing. Ignoring feelings, ignoring intuitions, that kind of thing in a lot of cases, because a lot of it was really like dangerous delusional stuff. And there was like one period where I went off of medication altogether a couple of years ago, and I just went completely nuts. I started to think that the world around me was toxic and it was infecting me. And I just started to develop like just shaking all the time in public and trying to like get it off myself, etc. And I was just in a state of constant fear. And that's kind of what happened when I went off of meds completely. So my point is I've developed a very deep skepticism towards anything out of the ordinary, anything that's not like really direct sense perception. So feelings, intuitions, that kind of thing, because I have a tendency to just assume, rationally so, that it's a delusion caused by bipolar or something to that effect. So before I started taking mood stabilizers, I was much more religious, I guess you could say. I used to say the rosary a lot more. I used to do saint veneration, etc. In part because I had a much more less controlled way of looking at the world back then. And my emotions were just kind of crazy and running wild. And so I would have like ecstatic experiences and stuff like that. And once I started taking mood stabilizers and my mania started to dramatically decrease, I just didn't feel that to the same extent anymore. And I have a tendency to associate religious experience, as it's called, with me being manic or me being delusional or me engaging in magical thinking. And so it's very hard when you look at it. Religious aspects that aren't strictly like intellectual are very, very difficult to me, because it strikes of magical thinking, and I'm very scared of having, I just don't think if I have like, because some people have like ecstatic experiences when they're receiving communion or they receive a vision or something, and I'm just terrified of that. And if I had that, I would probably attribute that more to bipolar disorder or my mood stabilizers not working that day than to any kind of genuine spiritual experience. So I tend to be very, very skeptical about that kind of thing. And if you notice, I'm kind of skeptical about a lot of things, like be it The Happening, be it nuclear war, etc., because I've been through such a period of my life where I was constantly like high on apocalyptic and messianic delusions. So it's that combined with therapy has given me a very, I guess you could say, controlled way of looking at the world. And within Catholicism, at least, that's a very large portion of it, is things that I find to basically be true or not kind of magical thinking, like saints, the rosary, Mary. A lot of it is do this and you get that, and that's just very difficult for me to accept, because I used to believe in stuff like that all the time, like just random superstitious stuff, that things were, like I said, I've never had a psychotic episode, but just a lot of similar things like that. I believed God had sent me here to exterminate humanity because of their sins. And when I kind of became Catholic, I was initially just, because once again, I was manic. I think around that time I took a stronger antidepressant that sent me into a period of like 6 months mania, and actually No Chance was written mostly during that time period. I wrote it in like 3 months. So that's kind of what happened. And that's kind of the impact it had on me. And it makes religious belief, like I still very strongly believe in God and Jesus and the Bear Conductor and the Apostles' Creed and all that kind of stuff. But all the other, I don't know if you want to call it accidents or the external forms of faith, are very difficult for me, because they just seem like a form of wistful or magical thinking. And it's very hard for me to determine it. And it's very hard for me to take seriously other people's experiences, because so many of them were delusions for me. So I hope that was kind of interesting to you. I don't know if I'm saying too much about it. I just try to be honest with you guys. I don't know, maybe saying I was crazy most of my life is a bad idea, but I think it's important to talk about these things and get them out in the open. So I think a lot of people do suffer from these issues and they're just too scared to talk about them. One of the things I promised when I made this channel was I was always going to be real with you guys. And I guess this is me being real. So hope you appreciate it. Hope you learned something, maybe a bit about yourself, and I'll talk to you later.